Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Technocratic Podcast. Today, our guest is Claire Milligan, CEO of Aimably. Claire has led several organizations as general manager and SVP, including at Tally and Emburse. She has also spent time leading product and engineering teams as VP of Product and Engineering. Claire and I share an interest in helping CTOs scale their impact at private equity-backed organizations. So today we'll be diving into that. Claire, thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Bobby, I'm really excited to be here. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, and so it's really cool to connect.
Awesome. Likewise. I love all your posts. They're right up my alley, and that's why we wanted to do this show. So we'll dive right into it. My first thought is when a CTO is getting into a private equity-backed company for the first time, what is the big difference in that environment, the PE-backed company environment, versus more of a traditional environment or VC-backed or something like that? Can you kind of highlight what you think are the big changes?
When you think about private equity, it's different than venture capital. And in fact, it's different than bootstrapping. The idea of private equity is to take a very good company that has the potential to structure its financials differently and to have different kinds of success around those financials and to do it within a hold period. And that hold period is usually historically 5 years. Now we're getting down into the 7 to 10 range.
Right.
So when things are changing under private equity, that's on purpose. They will buy the company that has been successful and will actively make change, which they call value creation. And they will do that from the jump, right when they acquire you. In fact, they'll even already have the plan as they're performing the acquisition. That's part of the key process of that, is to have a 100-day plan of making a lot of changes. So when you're a CTO and you're entering this private equity world, whether by acquisition or by getting hired, you have to think about this from the standpoint of things will be changing, and those changes are related to new performance in a financial capacity. That might mean new revenue sources through acquiring other companies. It might mean expansion and cross-selling of products. It might mean a drastic reduction in cost in order to take advantage of the revenue you already have and making that turn into cash. So when you think about how a company may work, one or more of those levers and many others may be pulled in order to create a new company outcome at the end in terms of those financial statements. There's one other key point that's really important, though. Most of the time, they're buying the whole company and they're doing it using debt. And so you have to have cash every month available to pay that debt. And sometimes we don't think that way under venture capital because we receive the cash up front when they make the investment in us. So it may actually be a little bit of a reverse cash situation, which can affect decision making too.
That's a great point. Yeah. Having gone through this myself as a CTO, I think one of the biggest differences is how much private equity is focused on driving towards goals and monitoring that kind of activity through metrics. And it's one of the things that I think changed in me as a CTO a lot was I didn't look at as many metrics early in my career, but as I got more and more involved in PE, it was like you have to look at all the metrics, your engineering metrics, product metrics, your business metrics, and just the reporting overhead was so much more. And you had to just make sure that you were focused at that, on that. The other thing, I don't know what you feel about this, but I think in small, mid-market sort of private companies that maybe have a founder or two or three founders, the sort of structure of the company just sort of doesn't matter as much. If you're getting the job done, everybody's happy. When you're in PE, they want things to look and operate a certain way oftentimes. And, so like the actual organizational structure, the operating model, they sometimes have a huge say in that, and they might want things to be sort of standardized in this way, or maybe they want the ratios between QA and dev to be something that you weren't thinking about before. So like the organizational changes seem to be quite important to the shift when you get into PE. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons that kind of figure into that. One is pattern recognition. When you are leading the private equity deal, you're the deal lead on their side. Your job is to create results. And if you have to learn what's unique about each one of these portfolio companies and how they operate, and to be able to find the leading indicators of whether or not this company will follow along in your goals and report those finances that you want.
Right.
And you have to learn all of them unique, it's going to be really hard. So one of the aspects that they're thinking about is if I can compare apples to apples of the revenue to cloud cost ratio, or what you're saying, the dev to QA ratio, then I can use that information to predict whether or not I'm on track for my financial goals. So that's like item number one. Number two, there's always an exit plan. And that exit plan may be strategic acquisition. So let's say you're somewhere in, fintech, you might be thinking about Visa. So, or it might even be IPO, though that's rare. And most common, it's going to be sell to another PE firm. And the storyline in all of those cases will be this company will fit into your operations because it runs like a standard company. And so what made you super cool, because you didn't have a customer support team, you had a like product evangelist team that might not work really as they're planning their exit for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, that's a good segue into this next topic around CTOs and their understanding about what value creation means. You talked a little bit, you sort of mentioned that word. Describe for our audience a little bit about value creation, what it means to the PE firm and what it should mean to the CTO.
Yeah. So when we tie it back to the word business valuation, let's start there. So depending on the kind of company you are, your valuation is structured a certain way. But software companies, it's usually a multiple of revenue. Sometimes if you're not growing, it's a multiple of your EBITDA, or basically your net of what you make in profitability. And so when you're thinking about value creation, what you're trying to do is expand that multiple. So expand the impact of not only the number that gets multiplied, but also the multiplying factor. So let's use a revenue story. If revenue is growing much faster than an expected rate for the size of business you are in the market you are, then your revenue multiple is going to go up. So there's going to be a lot of push to make that revenue grow faster, to grow that multiple. On the other side, also, let's multiply by a good revenue number. So you'll see those two push and pull factors to ultimately create greater business valuation. That cascades down to this idea of value creation teams or operating partners that come in, operating advisors, third parties that come in. And what they'll do is some version of a playbook, which will take a standard basic component of your business and implement a strategy on it that will be more cost effective or more revenue growing or more efficient, so that all the little corners of your business operation can grow into those value outcomes.
Yeah, that's a perfect way that you talked about that with all the little corners is exactly right. Like spending time in private equity myself, I was on the operating partner side, and you really focus on optimizing like certain specific departments and areas, for example, product and engineering. So CTOs who are in more traditional companies, maybe non-private equity companies, although those are starting to become the more traditional ones, they don't, I find like they're not spending a ton of time thinking about like literally like the value that they're creating for the company, the way they have to, at the level they have to at private equity. Because when I go and advise a company, I'm asking those questions. And oftentimes if it's a new CTO, maybe they don't quite understand even the nature of the question. And so then we go through a process of explaining to them like, hey, look, this is what we mean by this for product and engineering. And it might be something like, how much ARR are you generating from this new product launch that you did or something? And people do care about that in non-private equity backed companies as well, but it's just not emphasized sometimes as specifically and as intensely as it is in private equity. It's just such a focus that every quarter you have to produce A, B, C, D value for your organization. And I think it's even harder in my opinion, I don't know how you think about this, but I feel like it's quite hard for CTOs in PE-backed companies versus like product leaders or CPOs, because engineering has to prove some kind of business value. And that's difficult a lot of times. Like, okay, you cleaned out a whole bunch of product technical debt. what kind of value did you generate? If you're a CTO talking to a private equity person like me, explaining to me how the technical debt made business value happen can often be a challenge, I think, for CTOs. And it's like a skill they have to develop to do the mapping from all the stuff in the engineering level up to in product, then business, and explain that to the private equity people, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually add on to that to say that you have to develop two different skill sets. Number one is how do you translate the effect of what you're doing? And the second is how do you evaluate what is conventional wisdom for a CTO to be taking on against those financial goals? Because a certain company at a certain stage in that hold period may not want to take on the pile of technical debt, although from a technical standpoint,
That's
it makes
exactly
a lot of
right.
sense.
That's such a good insight. That is, and it's a perfect segue into my next topic, which is what should CTOs understand about exit timelines and
Yeah.
just the entire life cycle of a company post acquisition into a private equity firms. Can you kind of just outline the big phases?
Yeah. Well, let's start with diligence. There's when you're having the conversation about whether or not you should be acquired, you're going to go through a period of diligence. There's when they ask you all the questions and they ask you at 5 different times and they ask you for detailed data and you think that you don't even have it. And then they ask you again and you're like, why are you bothering me? And you're getting really angry. That's diligence.
That data room becomes like your main nemesis for a CTO is the data room and every request in that.
If you
But
think
yeah,
SOC is hard, you
right,
have not been to
exactly.
diligence. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And so after that, then you have the first 100 days. And in the first 100 days, what you have to understand is that in order to buy you, they had to come up with a brand new budget that's based on a whole new set of financial strategies. And then they had to underwrite the debt that they took on to buy you against the timing of executing that budget. So the first 100 days, you might think they might say, we're going to leave you alone. And that's cute and that's fun. But their job is to get you on the right track to performing against that within those days.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of change that can happen. Sometimes they'll already have executive decisions made, brand new CEO tomorrow. That can happen. But at any rate, there's this shift that should be happening quickly and intensely towards that new strategy. Mm-hmm. After that, you've got the hold period, and there's kind of different subphases to that, but basically they're going to run through the different changes that need to be made in the order of priority to create new financial results. Because not only is that time period about making a new operating structure, but it's to do it in the order so that it creates the story for the next acquisition. Oftentimes, the first stages are cash stages, because again, we need to turn this into a cash generating opportunity. Unfortunately, often that can come along with layoffs or restructuring because your largest expense in software is people. And then your second largest is cloud hosting, which we'll get into that, but that's my specialty. And so those are the two areas where you can start collecting more cash. And then you start going in those strategic like revenue growth directions. At the end, you're going to be prepping for an exit. And so you go through this kind of pre-diligence, they call it sell-side diligence, that'll get you all bundled up and ready to go. And usually, historically, it was 5 to 7. Now we're talking to 7 to 10. And even still, sometimes firms are transitioning the same holding from an old vintage of a fund to a new vintage. So you may be around for a while, depending on what their options are for selling you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny because if you haven't, as a CTO, if you haven't gone through an exit before, that entire process is a little bit foreign to you. So it doesn't make such an impact. I feel like if you're that kind of CTO, you get acquired by a PE firm, people talk to you about some future exit, and you're like, yeah, I'm sure that'll be a thing one day or whatever. But the truth is, in my opinion, the best CTOs in private equity backed companies are the ones who are like laser focused on the exit, whether it's 5 years, 4 years, 3 years out, whatever it is. They're like super focused. They're always thinking like that because it's like, to your point, now if you're thinking about an exit, maybe you're not going to try to remediate 10 years of technical debt. You know, maybe now you're going to be much more strategic about it. But you have to have that exit focus or mentality in your mind. At least that mindset has to be there as soon as you get it. You know, as soon as you start this thing, constantly thinking about, well, one day we're going to get an exit, and what does that mean for these decisions or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I would add on to that also. Oftentimes there will be carve outs as well, which have a huge impact to a CTO. So you have to be asking those questions quickly. What products might need to be isolated instead of brought together?
Right. Okay, that's a good segue into bolt-ons. And you get acquired by a private equity firm, you're the CTO or a chief product officer, and they want you to do a bolt-on. They found this company that's a perfect fit in their mind, maybe not from a product or engineering standpoint, but maybe from a customer base standpoint or from a revenue standpoint. How should CTOs or CPOs think about bolt-ons? How should they handle that entire initiative or scenario?
Well, especially if you're a founding team member, it can feel very odd because you wanted to build the thing and you had these
Right.
ideas and you've been
Yeah.
talking about adding this feature. So why can't we just build this feature? Why'd you buy that company that did it wrong? Or even my own experience was, why did you buy all of our competitors? Like, why am I sitting across the table from this guy that I used to
Right.
actually hate? You know? So
Yeah.
shout out to Dennis Chow, by the way. He's great. But I think that your strategy has to be, remember, they're buying revenue. They're either buying revenue right now that's in your market. That's a good idea for the revenue to come to you and not somebody else. It's a way to
Right.
build your revenue story. Or they're buying the potential to sell your customers onto this additional product to grow you revenue. And so your strategy as a CTO has to be, how do I efficiently support these products? And how do I make sure that that revenue goes through the whole cycle through to profitability rather than costing us more to continue to support? Often a more ivory tower CTO will say, okay, cool, I've got a total AWS team and we just brought this bolt on and it doesn't have much of a cloud team and they're all in Azure, so we got to move them to AWS. That might not be a good cost efficient choice because that would take your eye off the ball at different places. It will have a labor cost associated with it. You will not be able to reduce force quite as quickly as you might want to. So just think about the strategy from a standpoint of, this is revenue you're purchasing. How do I enable the revenue as much as possible? And how do I make good decisions that will allow that to happen without necessarily being a perfectionist about it?
Very well. Very well said. There's a certain, I don't know, maybe this is a little bit like more social dynamics, but when a CTO is in a situation where the PE firm wants them to do a bolt on, but he or she sees that, oh, from a technical standpoint, this would not be a good idea. Let's say, and put in simple terms, like our stack is, I don't know, Node.js or something, and AWS, and that stack is .NET and Azure. How should the CTO interact and communicate these risks that they identify to the PE folks without offending them, without destroying their thesis about the bolt-on? There's probably a way to do that in a good way. Can you kind of, from your CEO vantage point, give us some
Yeah.
advice on that?
Well, interesting perspective is that my business partner did a lot of bolt-on diligence at our previous company, and so he was doing a lot of those, asking a lot of those questions. And initially, the question was, "Will this be a great fit to create a unified platform experience?" And the answer is almost always no, because you don't have the exact same patterns of backend software and databases and hosting decisions.
Yep.
It's important as a CTO in that position to say, from a financial standpoint, what are the true risks? So are there security holes that could be extraordinarily expensive to fill and catastrophic to the business if they were exposed? That's something to raise to PE. Is there a issue where libraries are so old that you will have to invest in these things? There are strategies that really have to do with finances. It's cost and revenue. And if either of those things are at risk because of the technical structure, that's what you bring up. And you bring it up in financial terms. And that's how you are heard. And then you also have to say to yourself,
Yep.
look, I don't like how this is done. I feel like these are anti-patterns, for instance, in how the code is written, but at the same time it functions, it's bringing in revenue, I don't have to worry
Right.
about it too much, and I can sell more people on it without it becoming even more fragile. That's
Yeah.
not necessarily something you want to bring up.
Yeah, exactly. I think you have to be pretty strategic about how you're communicating the risks, like you're indicating. And I think one mistake that CTOs sometimes make is is communicating like too many of the risks, many of which might not be relevant or,
Yeah.
might not be relevant for some time. And they just like dump the risk right onto the PE firm, and the PE firm sitting there being like, this person isn't playing ball with us. So it really, you have
Right.
to be careful. Yeah.
Yes, because then they don't get it. Becomes the storyline about you very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So I think the advice is try to understand the business case of the PE firm and your CEO, who's probably agreeing with this idea of this bolt on. Figure that out first before you come out with like, oh, their stacks is terrible or their product stinks or they're the enemy or something like that. Like, really understand the business side first before you comment too much on the risk side. But it is important to bring up something that's a
Mhm.
big financial risk. Like, if you have to spend, you're buying something for 10 million, but you got to spend 5 million to like put the security holes to rest and fix those. That's probably not a thing you want to keep quiet on.
Yeah. And another thing
Yeah,
is, you are the only person sitting in that executive room that has any idea what's going on with their cloud hosting bill. And
right.
so if you see something in there that is either an opportunity or a risk, it's important to bring that up because that is a direct financial impact.
Exactly. Yeah. Cloud security, two massive areas where you
Yeah.
could be spending a lot of money if you're not careful. One more question about the changes that a CTO has to handle being in a PE backed firm. How should they be handling board meetings differently? So let's say, for example, the CTO was part of the ELT pre-acquisition. There was a small board, but they weren't really always in every board meeting, or they attended for some updates and things. Now they moved into the private equity backed environment, and now all of a sudden the board meetings are much more routine. They're happening sometimes. I've been in a situation where the board meetings would happen every month. So
Yep.
you got a monthly board meeting, and it puts this tremendous overhead on the CTO to prepare for it. How should they handle this new cadence of board meetings and the responsibilities of that?
Yeah, well, I think that it's hand in hand with the fact that your job is now a financial job. So reporting helps the board
I
understand,
love that.
are we keeping up with the timing of where we need to be every month? They're only going to be asking for monthly board meetings when results need to happen on a monthly basis. So your job is to create financial results with technical strategies and solutions. And part of that is making sure to confirm every month that you are meeting those goals and you've got that cadence in alignment, and you're also flagging things quickly. So if you come in and you say, look, I have certain financial responsibilities, the most important thing to do with the board meeting is to communicate at that strategic level and make sure it stays there. So you say, we're taking on X and so technical project, communicate it at that financial strategy level, but then also kind of block in a way when the conversation gets too technical. Because these guys sit on the board of, I don't know, like 15 other software companies, and they're sometimes having deep conversations about .NET versus Java. Why? We don't know. It's not worth their time, but sometimes they are. And so your other job is to say, look, I'm the leader of this strategy, and so this is where we want to go is X. Am I correct? Okay, this is how we'll get there, rather than getting the conversation too down deep into the weeds, because it can get there on all topics. Marketing, you will know too much about lead flow that you do not need to know because you sit in that board meeting.
Right, exactly, 100%. It gets pretty in the weeds. And you said something actually I thought was awesome. The CTO is now, you're thinking much more about, I forgot the exact quote, how you said it, but the CTO is now thinking much more about finance than he or she ever was before, the financial picture, and they're more of a financial steward than they ever were before. In that sort of world, how much should a CTO be responsible for helping to drive EBITDA targets in your mind? Like, are they in the critical path of that? I guess it depends on the company, but can you comment on that?
Without getting too in the weeds in financial statements, you've got kind of two areas of expense that are really important. The first is cost of goods sold, which is like, how much does it cost to service the customer's contract? And then there's the rest. There's all your other operating expenses. Both of those get deducted from revenue, and then you get an EBITDA number or profitability number. In my opinion, the CTO is the executive who owns the cost of goods sold, which is actually the more important expense, the one that really drives business valuation. There's a couple of things that factor into it. Number one is cloud hosting, like can they get their software that they asked for? Number two is customer support, because that's usually included in the contract or even paid extra, but either way, it's in the contract, so it has to be there. And then number three is professional services. So did I pay for onboarding costs? Did I pay for assistance in building out this product suite of some sort? It is incumbent on the CTO to make the product both cost efficient in hosting, easy to support and bug free, and very easy to give a profitable professional services engagement on. If we're cutting corners on those areas and throwing people at the problem, which can be a strategy during VC ownership, you are incurring a lot of cost up there at that top line that you shouldn't be, and it is your sole domain to fix, in my opinion. Now, yes, this customer support folks and the professional service leaders can make different strategies on how to support, but if the product's not there, they can only do so much. And so that it cascades straight down to EBITDA, and those are the areas where you need to focus.
Yeah. Where in your experience do you see CTOs overspending?
Well, when you think about it in the strategic standpoint, there's often this like the ivory tower versus the cutting corners mindset. Founding CTOs really lean into one of those two camps, and both of them can create a lot of cost. So there has to be a pragmatic balance between the two. When you then go deeper, a lot of it has to do with redundancy, compliance, SLAs. That's areas where you can spend a lot. There's a quote that a former colleague of mine said. We worked together in an expense report software company, and he said, "I will pay you money if you can tell me what an expense emergency is." You might be paying somebody back short, like a little bit delayed. You might be paying your credit card bill a little bit delayed, or maybe too much or incorrectly, but these things are all minor. And so when you are then operating an expense report company, you should have a completely different disaster recovery approach, SLA approach than one who is managing critical medical records or real-time factory performance at high volume factories. So making those decisions, not based on your idea of perfection, but on your idea of what is our industry and what do our customers actually need, that's another area where you can be spending a lot of money. And then the third is just ignoring the things that your people spin up or do. Because when you think about it, it's like your cloud hosting costs and your people costs, if you're just holding on to the team or the structure in order to protect what you have, that can be a very default mindset. I did well, our team achieved a lot, and we are still going well. So my job now is to defend my team against this PE incursion. The moment you get into that mindset, you start allowing a lot of costs to just kind of hang out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In my experience, I see some CTOs making this mistake of holding on to their organizations that might be large and perhaps a little bit bloated when they were like pre-acquisition. And then, the demand for efficiency comes from the PE side, and maybe a more focus comes to the product roadmap to match with that. And there's a resistance because this is your team, you built it up, all that stuff. So they just like hold on to it for as long as they possibly can, their resources, their teams. And that ends up, I think, hurting them, because if they start the efficientizing of the spend earlier, it's so much easier than having just this really rough moment in time that they've just kind of like created for themselves because they weren't willing to do it earlier. I think that's one big thing. And then I think it's interesting, but like once you're in a PE-backed firm and you're looking at your cloud costs and things, there's just as much demand from PE to be efficient there. And so most, I find, cloud footprints are pretty sort of like they're double the scale they need to be at. And PE firms don't necessarily want that. They want the cloud to scale with the revenues and with growth and all of that. So I find CTOs, even earlier in my career, had this mindset of like, I need to build for scale. Yes, you need to build for scale to some degree, but not to an extreme degree. And that is a mindset shift that kind of has to happen for CTOs. What does it take in somewhat of a practical sense? You're a CEO. If you look at a CTO, getting a non-finance oriented CTO to align with the company's financial goals. How should a CEO go about making that alignment happen? Obviously, if you just send the financial goals to your CTO and never talk about them, or even a half an hour conversation, it's usually not enough. What is the process almost that it takes, and how long should it take? Like, is the CTO getting a grace period of like a year, or is it like 6 months after acquisition to get aligned with the goals? Just talk us through that a little bit.
Well, I think if you're the CEO and you haven't prepped the CTO during the selling phase of your business prior to even diligence coming in, then you've failed your CTO. So I think that it shouldn't be like an after conversation, but it needs to be a before conversation. Yeah. That being said, it is critical to understand financial statements. It's critical to understand what the difference is between an asset and an expense. It's critical to understand how you affect the company. And if you delete $1 here, what the impact is overall to the business. What about interest expense? These kinds of things that I honestly
CapEx,
learned
OpEx,
originally from the Dummies books, and I stand by it.
Remember when those were all the rage? I love the Dummies books. Those were
right?
great.
You don't need an MBA necessarily when you've got the Dummies books.
Yeah. Or if you have a great CFO. I mean, I had lucky to have 3 amazing CFOs in my career, and they explained CapEx and OpEx to me. And I was like, wow, didn't know that. Okay, this is awesome. So you can get lucky too like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which also, side note, if you're the CTO coming in saying, oh, hey, we just acquired this company, they are on-prem, they own all their servers, that's a capital expense, that's an asset. And from a technical standpoint, we should totally move them to the cloud. From a financial standpoint, that's a terrible decision. Unless you build efficiency in it, and that's rare.
Yeah,
and until you then have to buy new servers, and then it's a really good idea. So there can be a timing question.
Exactly.
And so you have to think about that.
Those are such good insights. Absolutely. As you sort of think about the different CTOs you work with in your company and just in your own personal career, in your view, what kind of characteristics make up a winning private equity backed CTO? We went through a few of the things, knowing what value creation means, learning how to read a P&L maybe. But what are some of the other winning strategies the folks in our audience should know about? Now, they got acquired by private equity. What new strategy should they put in place for their personal kind of leadership?
Yeah. Number one, it's important for you to get a great sense of what the strategy is and lay it out for your team as fast as possible. So, for example, let's say the strategy is we're pulling cost out of the business. Okay. So it is important to say this team is going to change. This company is going to change in how it operates. Let's come up with initiatives to drive that efficiency. Let's set up sprints and teams to get there and to go in that direction. Similarly, it's really important to say everything that we assumed was true, we now have to verify again. And so if you can get your team moving with that mindset of curiosity and discovery about this thing that you feel deep ownership for, it's critical, because it's not just you, it's also everybody who works in your team too.
Those are great points. So especially this thing you said about everything we assumed was true has to be re-verified. That is brilliant, because the PE firm is verifying everything that you said was true. So you have to be aligned with them and stuff. And a lot of things, it's actually a good opportunity. You can go and you can look at your ecosystem, or you can look at the way you're running things and think about whether that is the right thing going forward. I think that comment you had earlier about understanding the exit timelines and all that is huge. I also think figuring out of course you've got the macro thesis that the PE firm has about your company now. But one thing that's interesting to me is, as a CTO, what do they specifically think your organization and product, let's say you're running product and engineering, you're a chief
Yeah.
product and technology officer, CPTO, like what do they think your department is supposed to drive, what is the value they're supposed to create? Because a lot of times CTOs get into it and they're like, oh, I now have to become a master of internal efficiencies. And whereas I was focused on external growth, and now I have to focus on internal efficiencies, or even the reverse of that. Or maybe the PE firm will have a thesis about the market and they'll say, okay, we're shutting down 4 of your segments and we're just going to focus on this one over here. And so really getting a good sense of the 2 or 3 main values that product and engineering have to create is so vital. And I think CTOs often miss that.
Yes. And once you figure it out, then make sure your team knows it too.
Yeah.
So we come in our own services. We work with private equity firms, work with operating partners like yourself, and then we'll come in, we'll work with a CTO, and then we'll come in and work with the cloud engineering team. And there will be such a disconnect between the stated goals at those 3 levels, always.
Right. Yeah. And if you can be a CTO who aligns everybody, I mean, the PE firms love that. A person who creates clarity and alignment and matches to the business goals, that's huge. Now, you were mentioning something just now about how you all work with PE firms. So tell us a little bit more about Aimably. What are the products and services you all offer?
Yeah, so we're specialists in cloud hosting, cost efficiency, and reporting. We work exclusively in the private equity sphere. We help firms with diligence and understanding not only how much you're spending in a potential acquisition, but why, where it can be reduced, and also costs by customer and product line and margins and that kind of information that can be harder to grasp until you're really in there. It can also help with underwriting. The second piece that we work on is during the hold period, we work with portfolio companies to get that cloud hosting cost dramatically changed. We have a bias towards scale. And when I say scale, meaning scale against workloads, cutting out all the inefficiencies in that kind of stable environment that's large for no reason, or protecting you from being woken up in the middle of the night, which is a clear thing that is important to people. So we helped companies maintain their performance at their current workloads and grow, but by cutting out a lot of cost. Our average is, at least for AWS, it's currently 56% cost savings, which is pretty insane.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Do you all work with Azure and the other cloud?
Yeah, we work
providers?
with Azure, GCP, AWS, and then depending on your configuration, Oracle Cloud. I could go into that for a little too long, but
okay.
At any rate, each one has its own peccadillos. Azure, you can find less to save, but you can do it almost always within the month. It's all very easy to acquire, whereas every CTO that is on AWS, and I say the word graviton too, is going to groan because it can save you a lot of money, but it takes a lot to get there.
Okay.
The third offering that we actually do is we do cost allocation consulting. And as you become more familiar with your financial statements, this can actually be critical because you as CTO are not involved in the accounts payable process and booking your actual costs to your financials. And if they don't match, like for instance, if you're putting your alpha dev test stage into your cost of goods sold, which they do not belong there, you can actually be affecting your valuations pretty significantly. It's also helpful to report by customers if you can, departments and that kind of thing. So there's a true reflection, for instance, in a freemium model on the cost of sales. All of those things are really important to being reported correctly for the margin expansion you're looking at and the multiple expansion that you're looking at. And once you really get into that technicality of how financial statements are reported, you can be the linchpin to changing that purely from a reporting standpoint.
Okay, got it. Can you describe a little bit are you more services or do you have a platform?
I love that question because we had the total intention when we started. We were like, we are software. We have been software. Our experience is software. We will be a software platform. We're now totally professional services, but we use our software platform to do it. So we understand that in private equity owned environments, especially, there's so much required to master the playbook of the specific firm, to make sure you're meeting the goals and the reporting needs. So we have a whole powered software zone. And then on top of that, we provide the consulting.
That's really good. It's funny because as a as a purchaser of these kinds of services and products, I haven't seen a lot of products that lived up really to the promise when we first bought them. Like the promise of the savings, and there's so
Yeah.
many companies out there in this space that are saying we're going to use AI and it's going to take your bill down to almost nothing. It's going to be incredible, and then we bring them in and like nothing
Yeah.
happens like the way that they describe. Maybe you can give some insight into this space that you're in, and is AI actually helpful? How can it be helpful? I sort of am in your camp of like the professional services seem to have a better impact on cost savings and things, but maybe you can comment about that.
Yeah. The market is kind of divided into two camps, and we're in a third category with another company. So there's the resellers, and they get aggregated discounts. And in turn, they can pass a lot of that on to you. So you can be eligible for a total spend discount that may be better than what Azure, GCP, or AWS may give you directly. They also offer some basic consulting on cloud cost optimization, but you have to understand that they get the most from these guys when your bill grows. Not even when it stays the same. When it grows is when they get those incentives. So there's kind of some cross purposes there. That being said, the basics they cover very well, and often their support is much better. But you wouldn't necessarily choose them for major impact. It's a nice shave off the top relationship.
Yeah.
The other category is going to be the contract brokers, and that can be automated. It can be manual. There's a whole range of those, and some of them are AI driven, and some of them specialize in private equity. Our friends over at Prosper Ops do that. They're great people. What I will say is that it's limited to contracts. And so that means savings plans or reserved instances. And so much of what we find when we do work actually is not those big dollar items. It will be hidden away extra stuff, that Elasticache cluster that you forgot to turn off, or you have it in cluster mode, but you're only using one endpoint, so you pay for the joy of two extras for God knows what reason. That's the kind of stuff that are really moves the needle. And so you can do your own contract management, and you can also use these brokers for better impact and lower effort on your part. So again, another great choice to shave off the top, but not huge in terms of your impact. In terms of what we do, and I mentioned there's another company out there. It's called Duckbill Group. It's run by Corey Quinn. They're fantastic. He's mouthy and I love it. They specialize in like Fortune 100, and we specialize in private equity, and the world is happy because of it. But what we do is we go down line by line in every single service you use. And at least in our case, what we do is we run a reconfiguration of your bill, a remodeling of your bill based on every different configuration change you could be making within the parameters of your requirements for workload stability. And in doing so, we then regenerate what your bill would be by all those permutations and combinations, and then give you the tools to make all those changes, plus guided very specific directions as to how to execute it.
Yeah. Let me ask kind of a maybe more philosophical question to you about the world of cloud optimization and stuff, because I think about it all the time because of my day job. And like I've found that like I'm not a deep expert on cloud ops, but I've been a CTO running cloud ops teams for many years.
Yeah.
But I can go into a company and it seems so clear as an outsider. You look at like the spend in cloud, and there's just like certain strategic things that you can sort of point out and get some sort of instant savings right off the bat, you know? And it can range from, I mean, I myself personally, and I'm sure as good as a consultant as you have, but like 500,000 here, a couple million sometimes I've been able to save. What is it that this is where the philosophical part comes in? Why do CTOs not think hard enough about optimizing their costs? They're obviously busy people. They're doing 1,000 different things. So can you make more a case for bringing in a firm like yourself? Because it's almost always, if the firm is good, it works. You know, we call you up, you have a certain fee, but then there's so much savings. And this is the kind of world where you can easily do the business case on it. But I find
Yes.
so many CTOs are like resistant to calling in an outside firm. I'm just, could you speculate on that?
It's incentives and education. And I don't mean education in a disparaging way, but it's about the financial education. So incentive, as a CTO, you are incentivized to ship products quickly and to make sure the environments are stable, reliable, and never go down. So if you're not a super expert in cloud cost optimization and you've heard horror stories, you're going to look at that and say, wow, you're going to take up my team's time so I can't ship features, right, and you're going to make it unstable, and we're going to have to wake up in the middle of the night. This sounds terrible, even if you could receive incentives on another side. So that's the other thing I talk to private equity teams about a lot is I say, you think that we're all aligned. You think that your CTOs are going to be really excited to take cost out because that's part of their goal set. Until you directly incentivize these folks, they move slowly. One of the things that we strongly encourage and only rarely get to be approved is we will recommend that they take a pool of the potential savings and they hold it as like a commission for the DevOps team. Faster you get there, the more of it you get. And you would be shocked. They find more than we find. It's like they'll do everything we recommend and then some. And it's fantastic. And they're great because they all are capable of this and they all can find it. It's just the incentive structure, right? The other piece is that we are not good at understanding dollars over time versus dollars one time. So especially if you don't have a good financial education. So let's say, okay, I've got this server running and I could turn it off. It's like $20 a month, whatever. I don't care. But no, I will not pay you $1,200 to take a look at it for a couple of hours, even though the cost over the year is roughly the same. I just did my math wrong, but you can get what I'm saying.
I get it. Yeah.
I'm terrible at mental math. But the cost over time analysis is really often hard. So you'll see operating partner like yourself says, hey, Portco team, it's time to talk to Aimably. We're really excited about you guys working with them. Such and such other portfolio companies in our portfolio have had success. These are their success. Now it's your turn. And the CTO says, that's great. We've got so many goals. Let's talk in 6 months. And 6 months is a lot of dollars just to lose. And that's right. And what I think the CTO at that moment does not realize is that they're putting their name next to those 6 months of dollars that they could be saving right now.
Yeah, that's so well said. Okay, on that note, how should the CTOs who are listening to this contact Aimably and avail themselves of your wonderful services?
Well, I would love to chat. Aimably is AIMABLY, and you can find us at aimably.com. You can find us on all the socials. My name is Claire. It's CLAIRE and Milligan, and I spew, hopefully not nonsense, on LinkedIn about what it's like to work under private equity, and so you can find me there. And you're happy to reach out directly to me. It's Claire at Aimably.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. There's kind of two sides of what we do when we're talking to CTOs when they first reach out. It's how do I succeed under this private equity ownership? And I do all those kind of conversations for free, just for fun at this point.
That's awesome.
And then the other side is the actual engagements. And so you can reach out to me both ways.
That's super, super cool. Claire, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much, Bobby. This was fun.
And I'm sure our listeners will have taken a lot from this discussion. So thank you to everyone for joining. And I'll see you next time on the Technocratic Podcast. In the meantime, keep the sharks swimming.